is Martin Ellaby. I'm the branch secretary in Manchester of the FBE. The FBE is quite a unique organisation in that we're made up all of volunteers. We all give up our free time. We're all built environment professionals. And what we really want to do is share stories and knowledge with you all, with the built environment professionals and the wider public. We've been going since 1946. We're a very established business. And as I say, we're not doing any of this for profit. We're doing this because we want to share stories. So if you are a Twitter follower, please do follow us. Look for FBE Manchester on Twitter, as we've got more events coming up, and our chair will talk a little bit more about this at the end of the event. Like a lot of people, organisations, we've been dealing with the impacts of COVID over the last 6 months. So some of our regular followers will notice that we've been a little bit quiet over the last few months. We did an event in July, our first online event, and this represents our second online event of 2020. And again, towards the end, our chairman, Stuart Grant, will give an indication of some of the events we've got planned coming up. So we haven't gone away, we've just been a little bit quiet. So introducing today's event, I am absolutely delighted that Len agreed to join us for this event. I've known Len now for around 15 years, and I actually met Len at the launch of his Main Road book, which covered the demolition of the Main Road ground, the old Manchester City ground. And embarrassingly, I went across to the book launch, and it was a £10 for the book. I didn't have £10 on me, and having never met Len before, I approached him and asked if I could give him an IOU for a book, which he kindly did. Signed it for me. I'd like to say I did pay him for the book, but Len, this is partly my IOU to you. You're a fantastic guy, and I'm really thrilled that we can share your story with the rest of Manchester here. So the event itself is going to be a presentation from Len of around 25, 30 minutes, Manchester, 30 years of regeneration in 30 minutes. And that will be followed by an in-conversation element with Lucy Smith, who's recently joined the FBE committee. Lucy, like Len, is also a photographer. And Lucy has also been doing a number of lockdown images, which you may see through the online chat throughout this event today, showing images of Manchester in lockdown, city centre completely empty. They're fascinating images. But as I say, that's Lucy Smith. Do have a look at that if you get time. Following that conversation element, we will be taking questions from you all. So I do thoroughly encourage you all to use the chat function and firing questions to us, which we can then put to Len. Do include your name and, if relevant, your business, as we won't be taking anonymous questions. So I would like to thank primarily Len and Lucy, and also Doodle Motion, Lucy's new employers. But first and foremost, I think we'd like to thank Planet IE, a well-established landscape business that's been running since 1998 in Manchester, and it's synonymous with good placemaking. Planet agreed to sponsor this event, and that's why we can bring this event free of charge. So big thanks to all of you at Planet. We'd really appreciate your support. In terms of housekeeping, if you could try maybe put your phones on Do Not Disturb, it's easily to be distracted at home rather than physical events that we're used to. And if you hear a fire alarm, obviously it's probably not a drill, so run for the hills. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Len, who's going to take us through Manchester, 30 years of regeneration in 30 minutes. Over to you, Len.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all. I'm going to hopefully set off a pre-recorded talk. Hello, you'll know by now my name is Len Grant, and thank you very much to the Forum for the Built Environment for inviting me to talk to my computer screen today. I haven't got very much time, so let's get cracking. I became a freelance photographer in June 1990, but my first major construction commission was the arena at Victoria Station, built in part over railway lines, and my first images were of the removal of the Victorian cast iron canopy at Christmas 1992. Some of the photographs I took back then seem like a very long time ago. I'm sure health and safety officers in construction companies would miss a beat when they saw these images now. Back in 1993, Manchester was bidding for the 2000 Summer Olympics, and this is Sir Bob Scott showing International Olympic Committee members the model of the site before a site visit back then. The scale of construction is pretty impressive, and every few weeks I'd make my way up to the top of an office block called Highland House, which I think is now a Premier Inn, to take progress photographs. The arena has recently celebrated its 25th anniversary. Since the Manchester bombing, these photographs have taken on a different poignancy for me, and I think the arena will forever be associated with the terror attack of 2017. Almost concurrently with photographing the arena, I was photographing a very different building being built on the other side of the city, the International Concert Hall, which was named the Bridgewater Hall, of course. If you're familiar with my work already, you'll know that I'm very much a people photographer. And although on all these construction projects I'd obviously followed the progress of the building being built, I'm as much interested in using the building site as a backdrop to take portraits of the workers and give them the credit they deserve. Throughout the construction process, my images were used in a display by Manchester Town Hall, and at the end we produced a book called Built to Music, and the spreads of which you can see here. Following the IRA bomb of 1996, I was commissioned by Manchester Millennium to document the rebuilding of the city centre. So let me start talking about the city centre by showing you this remarkable photograph from May 1997. It has the Arndale Centre in the middle. On the left-hand side with the turret is the Corn Exchange. On the right-hand side, the Royal Exchange. And pretty much everything in between got demolished, and the two pubs which you can see nestling in the shambles square got moved down to the medieval quarter. This is the demolition of Marks and Spencer's, and the hole in the ground left when it was pretty much gone. Not, as one website captioned quite recently, the bomb damage itself. This is the Royal Exchange and the Corn Exchange. Before the inside of Maxwell House was totally gutted, only the facade remained as part of the print works, I went on tour with a retired news editor from the Daily Mirror, and in the upcoming book I relay some of our conversations from that tour, which was a real throwback to pre-digital times of making newspapers. The facade you can see here has been retained, that's the print works, and these are the two historic pubs before they got moved. Sinclair's and the old Wellington Inn, and they were totally dismantled and moved 300 metres to nestle between the Corn Exchange and the Mitre Hotel. Back to the print works and yet more steel shots. Whole matrix of steel going up here that formed the basis of the cinemas at the print works. This is a remarkable picture that I took at the beginning of my commission to photograph the Lowry. Just beginning to do the groundwork there. No Media City, obviously, which came later, and no Outlet Mall, which came later too. Again, I photographed the workers. These are the foundation columns. And one of the exciting parts for me was watching the Lowry footbridge that was constructed on a nearby dry dock, sailed into position and effectively did a 3-point turn to get into position. This is the Quays Theatre under construction and the steelwork going on its roof. And this is the larger Lyric Theatre, the steel framework. The completed Lowry. And my photographs were exhibited in the opening exhibition, and we created a book. This aerial picture, not mine, shows the plan of the Lowry for the submission to the Millennium Commission. If you'd like to know more about the Lowry, this book I think is still for sale, even after 20 years at the Lowry Bookshop. Even before I'd finished photographing the Lowry, I went across the Manchester Ship Canal and started to photograph the construction of the Imperial War Museum North, which was Daniel Liebeskind's first permanent building, here he is on the left, in the UK. For the photographers who are in the audience today, just a technical note, I'm using a lot of fill-in flash on these photographs, which is a flash gun off camera to create these rather starkly lit images and sometimes quite dark backgrounds, which obviously I really like doing. Lots of steel and blue skies, of course. One of the things I love about photographing on building sites is that every day is different, and the building changes on each visit. Imperial War Museum clearly was a beautiful building to photograph, being constructed and completed, as these photographs show. My images were not published in a book, but were exhibited in the temporary exhibition gallery when the museum opened, including 17 large format portraits of the workers, plus a massive projection and soundscape which filled the whole gallery. It was amazing to work on and amazing to watch and listen to. This takes us up to about 2001, and up until that time I was photographing iconic buildings in Manchester and Salford, but then I was invited to document the beginnings of what was to become New Islington. And I'll start this section by introducing Agnes to tell us what it was like when she first moved into the Cardroom estate.
There was three girls from work came with me to see it. They thought it was unbelievable. It was like a palace because it was so big. Oh, they couldn't believe it. Oh, Agnes, I said, and look, you've got a porch at the front. Oh, it's gorgeous, you know. To me, that was the loveliest house I've ever we'd ever been in. It was marvellous. It was really lovely. Why they pulled it down, I'll never know. There was nothing wrong with them houses, only they let them go. As soon as they started putting families in, I don't know, they call misplaced families or somewhere for them to stay for the time being, who couldn't care less. That's when it started to go down. Then the drugs came on. But nobody came to sort drugs out. We were just left there. I mean, to face everything. Nobody bothered. So then everybody just gave up hope. Do they understand what they're doing when they pull these houses down, you know, what they're doing to people? Now, okay, they've got a lovely name for it now, regeneration. But in the old days, they would have called that a slum clearance.
One of the first things I did for my New Islington Commission was to photograph the community consultations that were going on at the Cardroom estate at that time, over a period of months in an unused pub, usually on a Sunday afternoon, where plans gave way to small models and then larger models, as the community was brought on board by the lead developer, Urban Splash, and its partners. And then I photographed some of the local residents in their own homes and interviewed them and put that all together in the first of my 2 books about New Islington, which is called Cardroom Voices. My New Islington work is immense. It goes from 2001 to 2008. I can't possibly show you everything, but let me just highlight some photographs which are interesting. This is the beginnings of the New Islington Canal, taken from one of the Ancoats mills looking towards Ancoats Hospital in the distance, and absolutely everything has changed since then. Those of you who know New Islington will be familiar with these buildings, the first social housing. This is Islington Square under construction looking towards the city centre, and with the mills on the far right. The retail park that you can see in the distance has obviously been since demolished, and every plot of vacant land on this image has now been developed. This is taken pretty much from the opposite corner of New Islington in October 2007, as I was coming to the end of my documentation period. And I don't know how easily you can see this on your screen. It looks great in the book. The retail parks, as I said, on the left has been demolished. You can see on the far right chips being built and the canals still being under construction. Old Mill Street down the centre with its angled lampposts is just about complete, as is the water park, but not yet connected to the Rochdale Canal in front of the mills. And you might just be able to pick up Islington Square, that snazzy social housing in the middle on the far in the background. An incredible image. The New Islington development up until about 2007 is covered in my second book, From the Ground Up. Right, so we're a little over halfway through the talk now, and I've still got quite a lot to tell you. I've got to cover the demolition of Main Road Football Ground, 6 years of working in East Manchester, the construction of the Co-op's new head office, One Angel Square, the transformation of Trafford Town Hall, and my switch into urban sketching, a new way of telling stories, and the sketchbooks I've created for Mayfield Manchester. So let's get cracking. I spent 6 years documenting in East Manchester. I was commissioned by New Deal for Communities and New East Manchester Limited. I produced lots of progress photographs and PR photographs, but what I'm most proud of is a collaboration between Myself and graphic designer Alan Ward in this magazine called East, which we produced 10 copies of, which covered not only the physical changes going on in the area, you can see some images of the Beer the Bang being built, but also the resident involvement, which was absolutely key to the success in East Manchester. This is an extract from the book. I write, "We may look at areas like Ancoats or projects like the Bridgewater Hall as exemplars of Manchester's regeneration. But for me, the neighbourhood work in East Manchester is more significant. In a few short years, residents who were once fearful of leaving their homes reclaimed their neighbourhoods. A desperate feeling of powerlessness was replaced by cooperation with those in charge. Initiatives piloted here were replicated throughout the city and beyond." 2003, the City Council had commissioned me to photograph the demise of Main Road Football Ground in Moss Side. Manchester City were moving over to the City of Manchester Stadium in East Manchester, and I was particularly interested in, yes, the demolition, which is always very photogenic, but how local businesses and local people would react to Main Road disappearing. This is what Sue and Essie from the Clement Road Chippy had to say. "We look forward to a Saturday. There was always lots of excitement with all the police, the cars, the horses, the customers. The whole area was alive. Everyone was excited. But now the buzz has gone. We've lost a lot of business. One match was equivalent to a week's takings. So imagine 20 home matches a year. We've lost 20 extra weeks in takings. The shop was struggling during the week, but the matches saved us." That work was now published in a book called Full Time at Main Road, which is now sold out, I'm afraid. For those of you who have only known Ancoats for a few years, let me take you back about 20 years. This is McConnell's and Kennedy's Mills, incorporating Royal Mill, from 1999. This is the view from the canal. From about 2003, I followed the renovation of Murray's Mills and McConnell's and Kennedy's Mills, and also St. Peter's Church, which is of course now home to the Halle. This is Murray's Mill when I first encountered it in 2003. It was crumbling, and with the efforts of the Ancoats Preservation Trust was restored. At that point there were no plans for it to have a new use. It was later converted into 124 apartments by architects Field and Clegg Bradley Studios and landscape architects Planet IE. I've got dozens of amazing photographs of Ancoats, hundreds I'm sure. The ones you're looking at now are of Royal Mill in about 2003. But let me finish this very short section with this amazing image of what is now Cutting Room Square. The ice plant on the left, the Smith's Arms there, which has since been demolished. You've got St. Peter's Church, which is now Halle St. Peter's, and Jackton House on the right. And everything in the foreground has been demolished to make Cutting Room Square. After the financial crash of 2008, my construction projects came to a bit of a halt, and I diverted into doing work around social exclusion and produced some books and some award-winning blogs which are featured in the upcoming book. But I was back on building sites around 2011 doing 2 commissions concurrently. The first was the cooperative's new head office, 1 Angel Square, for which I also wrote the text for the subsequent book. It was very much a story of transformation from spaces that were no longer fit for purpose, and a story of the co-op's commitment to the city, really, and its rationale behind creating Noma. And of course, it was a story of making one of the most sustainable buildings in the UK, powered as it is by rapeseed oil grown on the co-op's own farms. Designed by 3D Reed and built by BAM, it was really interesting building to photograph and also witness what I think was quite an extraordinary project team spirit. I think people realised they were working on a very special building, and for many a career highlight, no doubt. The Trafford Town Hall Commission was all about transformation too. Commissioned by 5+ architects and shepherds, I documented the old town hall extension being demolished, a new one being built, and the 1930s town hall being totally renovated. What was great for this book is that I had access to lots of historical photographs, plans, invoices from the building of the 1930s town hall, which were fascinating, and it was great to compare and contrast. 5+ architects' transformation was indeed astonishing, and I really enjoyed photographing the completed project. Here's a quote from somebody who I came across while I was completing the final shots. "My favourite bit," she says, "I think it has to be the street. I absolutely adore it. When I have 2 minutes, I just stand in different places and watch how the light floods into the building." Terrific stuff. I'm sure in the Q&A that follows this little talk, we'll be talking about my switch to urban sketching and adding that into my storytelling repertoire. But in the meantime, let me show you some of the work I've been doing for Mayfield. Since the beginning of last year, I've had the pleasure of working for the Mayfield Partnership and documenting what's been going on in that part of the city. And as most of you know, Mayfield near Piccadilly Station is a huge site, including a derelict former station and a rather neglected river. Over the next 10 years, it'll be a £1 billion mixed-use development with offices, retail, leisure, etc. The first part of which will be the creation of a new park. So although nothing permanent has been built yet, there's been lots and lots of activity, which I've been documenting for what will be a series of sketchbooks. The first one came out last year, and the second one is complete, but because of the pandemic has yet to be printed. But here it is, very quickly. You can see digital versions of this one and the first sketchbook on my website. Well, there it is. That's the end of my talk. 30 years in about 30 minutes. A bit of a dash through, but you get the gist of what I've been up to for 3 decades. And I look forward to answering some questions in the Q&A that follows. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Len. It's been amazing to see. It's great to see the chat. Everybody's been talking about how brilliant it is to see some of the images. For some of us, it's a trip down memory lane, and for some of us, it's this beautiful insight into the regeneration of Manchester. And I'm super excited. My name's Lucy Smith. I'm also a photographer, and I feel like it's such a treat just to spend some time with Len. We're going to have a chat together, and I'm going to ask him some questions. But during that time, please do feel free to keep using the chat function. Ask your questions, because we'll have time for that after this. So Len, thank you so much for that. The images are iconic, and we're going to look through your journey of the regeneration and documenting that as we chat. But could we just start off with, how did you start off in photography? How did you become?
Yes, it seems a long time ago now. Can I just backtrack a little bit and just apologise to those people who've been making comments in the chat, because I was sharing the video that I've made. And don't I talk very slowly? Sorry about that. I'll try and talk more quickly. I haven't replied to any of them because I was fearful that I would do something wrong. So apologies for that. How did I start? I became a photographer in 1990, by which time I'd already spent a decade after leaving college as a salesman, really. Worked for Central Television for quite a long time, and photography was very much my hobby. I was a very bad salesman and didn't particularly enjoy it. And when I moved from Nottingham, where I was living, to Manchester, I joined Counter Image, which was a film, photography and video workshop on Whitworth Street West.
Right.
And got to know people, and in fact staged my first exhibition there, which was in 1988. And if I can get the technology working again, I will share some of those. Can you see that, Lucy?
Yeah, wow, yeah.
So these were some of the portraits I took for my first exhibition. Was all about profiling artists in Manchester, working in Manchester at the time. And I subsequently came to the attention of a TV director, Phil Griffin, and we made a documentary with another Manchester photographer, Mike Black, and that was quite good fun. So that's how I started, really. It was more of an opportunity to get out of dull jobs, to be quite honest, rather than a real desire to take photographs. So it was a bit weird beginning, but it also coincided in 1990 with regeneration really getting underway in Manchester.
And I think it's really interesting because you started in portraiture, and we'll see more as we go along about how that informs how you've documented the regeneration.
Absolutely. Before I'm jumping in, but people see me as a regeneration photographer. It's always with portraiture. Sometimes people confuse me as an architectural photographer. Not so. I'm really, as you say, a portrait photographer with regeneration as a backdrop.
Yeah, and you can totally see how that comes across, and we'll look at some of how you tell people's stories, which I think is so important in regeneration. And before we jump into that section, obviously you've documented some of the most iconic changes in Manchester, and I think one of the most poignant and sobering moments in Manchester was the bomb in 1996, and just wondered if we could just talk a little bit about that, and what was your experience of that, and how was the feeling in Manchester at that time?
Right, let's, I think, yeah, I started photographing, I was commissioned, as I said in the talk, by Manchester Millennium. And it's a shame, isn't it? We kind of have to differentiate now between Manchester bombings. The Manchester bombing of 1996, I didn't rush into town. I wasn't a news photographer. I didn't particularly want to see the damage. And when I went in, well, this was Shambles Square.
Yeah.
Let me just, sorry, I'm flicking through those a bit too quickly, which is pretty much where New Cathedral Street is now.
Okay.
And of course was the home to the historic pubs. But yes, Manchester had a feeling, as it has done since, of being quite a muted experience for people, but one of support and people pulling together. Different experience because, of course, there was a lot of property damage, but no lives were lost. This was before Urbis actually got built and Cathedral Gardens.
Wow, look at that. So talk us through what's happening here in this image.
Okay, so this might be about a year or so into my commission to document the rebuilding of the city centre. And in the foreground is what is now Exchange Square, and the tram lines of the second crossing would probably be running along the bottom left-hand corner. And this is the building of Marks and Spencer's and Selfridges. And Shambles Square that I mentioned is still complete, hasn't yet been demolished at the back there. So New Cathedral Street hasn't quite been made. And another picture here shows the creation of Exchange Square. And you can see what doesn't happen now, of course, is the buses going through the city centre and the Arndale extension on the right, and the facade of the Printworks or of Maxwell House, which was to become the Printworks, in the background there. Probably about 90. Things had moved on because you can see on the left that the Corn Exchange has been renovated.
Yeah, it's huge change.
I'm tracking back. These aren't, sorry, these aren't in chronological order, so that was a little bit before. But astonishing that the bomb was in 96, June 1996, and by November 1999, so much had been done by so many people. And testament to both the City Council and, of course, to the private sector. Lots of people I know who will be watching this will have experiences of working on that. And although I didn't see it, the effort that must have gone on behind the scenes to bring this place back must have been phenomenal.
Yeah, hugely changed the landscape of Manchester. Thanks so much for talking about that, Len. I think it's just really important to circle around that. And we have alluded to the fact that you're a portrait photographer. And so your work started to shift, and you spent a bit of time talking about the new Islington piece, but it would be great just to circle around that in terms of you kind of shifted the way that you documented that. Can you just talk to us a little bit?
Yes, I started that work in about 2001, just before the Commonwealth Games of 2002, obviously.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I'd done the Arena, the Bridgewater Hall, the work after the bomb, the Lowry, and I was beginning to do the Imperial War Museum North. So lots of iconic buildings being built. But New Islington was very different because it was a neighbourhood renewal. And I was very keen to tell the stories of ordinary people. It wasn't a brownfield site. This was the Card Room Estate. Let me just show you some pictures of that. This is the Card Room Estate that
oh, wow, yeah,
where people lived, and this image, again photographed from the mills, shows the person walking there is probably either in the canal or having a coffee in Pollen Bakery by now.
Yeah.
But is unrecognisable. This is some time later, probably 2 or 3 years later, the canal has been built, and Old Mill Street with the bent lampposts in the foreground. But again, if you're not familiar with Manchester at this time, a phenomenal change. Chips being built with the Ancoats dispensary in the centre there, and yes, it was very much about consultation. The developers, the client was the new Islington Client Group with Urban Splash as lead developers. And it was interesting how they consulted. We consulted over a number of months in a disused pub. And I would say the consultation was very thorough. We see slum clearances of the 60s and 70s, where consultation was practically zero.
Yeah.
And it's interesting really to compare and contrast, and how consultation, we're seeing some of that at the moment with Mangtopia, aren't we?
Yeah.
How developers are communicating and consulting with people who are actually living in the areas that they want to do something with.
Yeah, and this is a kind of poignant moment, isn't it, in the sense for the history of regeneration, because people are being asked questions and their stories are being told. And I think that that's what's beautiful about your work around this, is that their stories are being told. And have you got something you'd like to share about somebody's story? Because I think regeneration just brings such a complex array of emotions for so many people. And I think one of the beautiful things about your work is drawing out some of that storyline.
Well, Lucy, you know I've got something because we practiced it an hour ago. Yes, let me tell you the story about May and John. Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this working well?
Yeah.
So this is a conversation I had with May. The kids were getting in the empty houses and smashing them up. Oh, I should say by now, May and John had moved away into Ancoats, and I brought them back onto the Cardroom estate to stand on the site of their old house. So this is what they recall. The kids were getting in the empty houses and smashing them up. Because of the way the houses were laid out, you couldn't see them going in. All you heard was the banging. I was always afraid that someone would set fire to them and it would have spread right along the block to our house. Then I found a lump. I got breast cancer, which I reckon was stress-related. The surgeon at the hospital wouldn't let me out. She said, "You're not going back to that house. The housing we're going to move us is a special case." But John wanted to hang on for compensation. I told him what he could do with his compensation. I just wanted to get out. I was ready to leave him. I got the forms for this place and filled them in myself. I was going to move here on my own, but I couldn't leave him. It was awful, wasn't it, John? So, yeah, people's lives, regeneration in people's lives. You know, the headline is always what's being built, but there are real lives behind it.
Yeah. Are there some key questions that you think developers should be asking? I'm just throwing that out there now, but...
How long have we got?
Yeah, we might.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was to talk very briefly about consultation and about building communities. You know, there's a range of developers, there are a range of projects, and some people do it well and some people do it less well. I think there's plenty of scope for those people who are involved in regeneration, whether it's in Manchester or any cities, to be more open, to listen to people more, and to concentrate more on community building rather than on physical building. Because I remember, as one lady said to me in East Manchester, it's people that make slums, it's not buildings.
Yeah, it's good.
So, and interestingly, Agnes talked about her area. So when the Cardroom was built in the 70s, there were two other estates that were built in Manchester at the same time, and both are thriving. You know, it's not the buildings.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we talked earlier, didn't we, about the Mayfield and your kind of experience of them building community there, and obviously that ties in nicely because your business card now doesn't just say photographer, but it says something different. So do you want to just kind of
yes. So yeah, so as I said in the film, I've started working in Mayfield over the last year. And it's another way, I find sketching another way of telling stories. It's, you know, obviously it's different. I'm sitting on a stool drawing what's in front of me. It's different from photographs, but it's still storytelling. And that's been the essence of my 30-year career, to date, I would say. As I say in the back of the book, you know, it's only a semicolon, it's not a full stop. And I'm very much enjoying finding new ways of telling stories, and you know, Mayfield Stories is one of those ways. The first of, I hope, many sketchbooks.
Well, Len, I mean, I would love to keep chatting, but we also need to ask some questions from the floor as well. So I'm just going to invite Martin Ellaby as well. He's been looking at the chat, and we're just going to kind of post some questions from other people as well that they've been asking. Martin, do you want to unmute?
I'm unmuted. Can you all hear me? Great. Well, we've had lots of questions flying in and lots of lovely comments coming through. It's quite clear that people feel really passionate about the transformation of Manchester. And as a Yorkshireman in Manchester, I do feel like I'm kind of a slightly adopted Mancunian, but don't tell anyone in Yorkshire about that. So I'll fly through some of these questions. And if you do still have any coming in, there is a little bit more time for you to ask them. But I'll start off with Gemma Stubbs. Gemma's from Pulse Electrics. And what Gemma would like to know is there a future project coming up in Manchester, Len, that you'd like to be involved with? Anything that, you know, whether it's coming out the ground or has recently got planning permission, is there anything that gets you excited and you think, I'd like to be part of that?
It's about people, isn't it? It's always for me, it has to be about people. So, you know, I talked about photographing iconic buildings, and that was interesting, and I would photograph the workers doing it. And, you know, photographing something like the Imperial War Museum North as an architectural gem that it is, would take some surpassing. But for me, it's about being a conduit as well. I use this word conduit because I feel I have the ability to go to an area or in a project and perhaps act as the eyes and ears of maybe residents in that area. So it would have to be something along those lines. So has she got any ideas? Maybe. Yeah, it's that sort of thing. You know, hopefully when Mayfield gets back on stream, that's going to also keep me busy it's quite a long project. But yeah, plenty of scope.
Well, I have to say that's also come out. You know, you say that you've hoped that, you know, it comes across that you've kind of conveyed the human stories behind it. I have to say that's been one of the overriding comments from our audience today, is that people have been commenting how Len sort of feels, you know, his stories kind of feel like you're within the community, not just someone on the outside looking in, and there's a genuine empathy there. So I think the audience would agree with you there. I'll just turn now to Anita Singh, Turner and Townsend, and also an FBE committee member. Anita, we just want to know, Len, have you got any current exhibitions on, or is there anything sort of planned in the near future that people could perhaps go and see?
No, I haven't got any future exhibitions on. Obviously, I'm working pretty much flat out on the book, and it would be nice. It would be nice to think that some of that work could be exhibited at a book launch at some point, but restrictions as they are suggest that might not happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't got any exhibitions. What I would plug though, when in the next few weeks, I've been working with a charity called the Men's Room, and we're putting a little exhibition on in Home in the Inspire Gallery. Not my work, but work I've facilitated other people going to do. So I highly recommend that. Can I give a plug to my book?
You can, Len. Go ahead. That's what we're here for.
We're currently on 178 pages of this book, and it will be printed in October, and it'll be ready in November. You can still actually get your name in the back, pre-order and get your name in the back as a backer. If you search Len Grant and Big Cartel, you'll find the details there. And I know somebody's going to mention this, but I'll give it another plug. So I am also looking for a couple more corporate sponsors. So if anybody is interested in being associated with it, please email me at some point.
Thanks, Len. And who knows, perhaps, you know, a book, you know, a launch or an exhibition, of your work is something that we could look at as the FBE, perhaps, next year when we start to go to real events. It could be a really interesting event.
I apologise. I have forgotten. I am going to be talking this week with Manchester Archives, and we're talking about putting something in before the end of the year in their digital gallery. So November time, digital gallery of Manchester Archives. Passed my mind because I hadn't actually had the discussion about it yet.
Well, there's always a lot to take in on these kinds of events, and all I would say to anyone in the audience, if you would be interested in that exhibition, simply just follow Len Grant on Twitter if you're on Twitter, and I'm sure Len will keep everyone up to date on all of that. I've got another question here from Sarah Gallagher of These Four Words. Len, you may have touched on it already, but I just want to put the question on behalf of Sarah to you anyway. And Sarah attended the launch of Mayfield. And she really felt, like myself, I went along there, and I think most people would agree, it seemed to be a celebration of the value of community, because despite all these amazing transformations and buildings that we build, without people, there is no use for these things. So I think Sarah's really interested with your move to sketching. Was that sort of partly influenced by a different ability to frame stories and frame those human stories over photography? Did that have anything to do with that?
It was interesting because the switch came from, in the same way that photography started as a hobby. I'd always tried to draw most of my adult life, and probably about 2013, I discovered what's called urban sketching, and if anybody's interested, they should just Google that. And literally sketching out on the street. And I'd just do that as a hobby, as a diversion. And then it kind of shifted to be something that I offered as part of my repertoire, I suppose. And it is different. People stop and talk to you. Yes, people would stop and talk to me if I was photographing in Ancoats, but if I'm sat for half an hour or an hour on a tiny little stool with my knees up to my ears with a sketchbook in front of me, people do tend to stop and have a chat and inquire as to what I'm doing. So it's a different type of process. And I'm using it across all sorts of projects, not just regeneration. And it's also a super way if people don't particularly want to be identified, as some vulnerable people don't now in photographs. I can't sketch people accurately, so I just reassure them it's actually going to be fine. It's not going to look like you at the end anyway.
I've never thought about that, but yeah, that's really interesting. And so whilst we're talking about people, I mean, obviously you must have met some proper characters over the last 30 years. And I know it's hard, it's quite hard.
You mean from the council or developers?
Well, did anyone really stand out for you? And please don't say it was a young urban designer and asked you for an IOU for a book at a book launch, please.
Yeah. Oh, crikey. No, you're really putting me on the spot there. So that's 30 years and meeting probably hundreds of people a year. Somebody that really stands out for me. No, I've been very lucky actually. What has been great about my job, and I don't often call it a job, is that I have been able to use my creativity and my image making, whether it's sketching or photography, to meet people and be in front of people. And I never really take that for granted. I think I've been incredibly fortunate to be able to do that. There's a lot of talk, isn't there, about how Manchester's changing, how the population is increasing and all this kind of thing. And I was been reflecting on that over the last few days and thinking actually what makes Manchester is its people, and more people coming into Manchester. They all call themselves, as you do, adopted Mancunians. So we take on the values that makes Manchester special, rather than diluting it with maybe other values. So we become stronger with more people. And yes, there could be criticism for how the city is developing and the pace at which it's developing and its architecture or whatever. But at the end of the day, what will be sustainable about the city is its people.
Yes. Well, yes. Well, that actually leads me on to, I mean, this is a question of mine, if that's all right, Len. It's because what strikes me, obviously, knowing you for a number of years, is you've got a really, what makes your work very distinguishable from anyone else I've actually met, is a sort of genuine empathy and interest in I guess people maybe sort of, you might say, on the fringes, and I'm just wondering where does that come from, in terms of that sort of, I guess, sort of social equality and the need for that within any successful city. Was that something that, you know, was it something that was instilled into you by parents, an influential teacher, or is it something that kind of grew over the years as you started doing this more and more and becoming more interested in people whose voices perhaps got forgotten?
Yeah, I think everybody's got a story to tell, and I think quite often we stay within our own bubbles, don't we?
Yeah.
But you know, I think it's very important that we all get to know different types of people, and I think some of it grew from being a photographer, and actually going onto jobs where I might be working in a kind of taking press shots, if you like, going into a situation where you've got to get people on board quite quickly, and got to get to know people quite quickly. But then it's getting to realise that even in a city like, well, not even in a city like Manchester, there are lots of different people with lots of, shall we say, lots of needs, and I think it's important that we recognise those and don't be fearful of them, I suppose. The question, I'm gone away from the question. The question was, how did I don't know, to be quite honest.
It just crept up on you over the years. Yeah, that could be the way.
It crept up on me, yes.
Yeah.
I guess it's that storytelling desire and wanting to tell other people's stories.
Yeah. Well, as I say, as someone who's got a number of your books and pre-ordered my own, I really do enjoy reading your stories. Now, I think as Lucy mentioned, we could talk and talk. I'm kind of conscious. I think I said that the event may go on till around 2:15, but I think a lot of people have just kind of taken this hour during their lunch break, and I think some people are having to leave naturally. But I just thought right now it might be just a good time to perhaps draw a close through this. People can obviously get in touch with you through Twitter, etc. And I'd just really like to thank you on behalf of FBE for giving up your time. I'd like to thank Lucy for doing a superb debut for the FBE. And just to make it clear, Lucy works for Doodle Do, not Doodle Motion, so apologies, guys. And without further ado, I'd just like to hand over to our chairman, Stuart Grant, just to sum up and give you an indication of some of the events that we've got coming forward for you in 2020. So thank you, Stuart.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Lucy. Of course, thanks, Len. I've got to tell you, that's the best lunch I've ever had. Well, I've had for a long, long time. A feast of Manchester, celebrating, of course, the personalities, the successes, the challenges, the humility, the empathy, and I think the resilience of Manchester. And that's said also as a Yorkshireman who's been here slightly longer than Martin, but a proud Yorkshireman living very proudly now as a Mancunian. And the journey of Manchester towards the celebrity city that it's now become, Manctopia. I might come back to that. But just to bring you up to date on our next event, we're actually going to focus more on the arts and culture theme that we've talked about today and how it shapes the built environment. As we all know, investment into sort of cultural projects was probably at an all-time high pre-pandemic. But as we all know, the sector and all those involved in it has been massively hit by lockdown. So what's the way forward now? We're going to hear from a developer or two, and you'll all know him then, who are investing in flagship projects, as well as some key influencers like Walk the Plank, Sacha Lord, who are leading the charge for what's needed in this brave new world. We're currently targeting a date of the 22nd of October, but we'll be announcing speakers and details in the next week. So please follow us on Twitter and FBE website for more details. And I think as well, with some cracking sponsorship packages available. So if you're keen to align yourself with art, culture, and of course FBE, please get in touch. So back to today. Thank you so much, Len, for sharing those moments of your own personal journey over the last 30 years. It's fascinating stuff. Unfortunately, I can remember it all. In the year of the 96 bomb, I was just coming to the end of my year as president of the Manchester Society of Architects. So I am a dinosaur, but I can't wait to read the book. And for those of you who are hungry for more, just to remind you, you can pre-order that book or even become a sponsor, because he has got a space or two. Go to www.lengrant.co.uk. Thank you to Martin and Lucy for planning and hosting today's event and making it so enjoyable. What phenomenal feedback we've had. You were both brilliant. Thank you. Thanks to Amy and Candy at FBE Central for producing the show for us and keeping everybody in line. Thanks again to Planet IE for sponsoring today. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Lindsay. I think you're on the call today. How are you, mate? Thanks for your support. And last but never least, thanks to all of you for listening and getting involved with some fantastic questions and chat. We could write a book on all that chat. Hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a bit different from the other events. We should do more of those. Share your feedback with us, please. And it has been recorded, so it'll be on the FBE website shortly. That's it. Have a good rest of the day. It's a little bit overcast here in the Wirral, but tomorrow's the return of the Indian summer, so I hope you can all get a bit of that. And that's meant to last for the next week. So keep well, keep safe, keep connected. Cheers, everybody. Bye.